Well, first things first, good morning, friends. My name is Jonathan Rufrano. I'm a policy director at the Digital Chamber, DC's largest and oldest blockchain and digital assets trade association. I act as a bridge between our industry members and lawmakers in DC. My job is to make sure that we all get fair and workable laws, regulatory clarity, and protection. It is truly an honor to stand before all of you today at what I believe is the defining moment for the industry. Each of you in this room has witnessed firsthand the challenges, uncertainties, and the regulatory turbulence that have defined the past almost 2 decades of blockchain innovation. For years, we have operated in a difficult limbo between regulatory ambiguity and outright persecution, building technology that has the power to reshape economies, increase financial inclusion, and create a new era of user-owned internet, all while facing the ever-present risk of unclear compliance requirements and sudden enforcement actions. Some of the brightest minds in the space have left the US, taking their innovations to jurisdictions that are more welcoming and clearer in their regulatory approach. Others, determined to remain, navigate an environment where the rules are often written after the fact, enforced without warning, and subject to shifting interpretations from different agencies that don't have the best track record of welcoming change, nor of communication, collaboration, or coordination with each other, let alone with entrepreneurs and technologists. But today, I'm here with a different message, a message of optimism and momentum. The tide is turning. The era of regulatory uncertainty and hostility is fading. The US is finally taking the necessary steps toward providing a clear, structured, and fair regulatory framework for blockchain and digital assets innovation. It's taken years of persistence, painful regulatory battles, and an industry that refused to stop believing in the promise of the technology and in each other. So let us explore the past, present, and future of blockchain policy and regulation in the US in order to understand why this is the moment that everything changes. The first decade of blockchain was defined by experimentation, massive growth, and regulatory opacity. The US government, by and large, was unaware of and did not seem to care about the innovation taking place at community meetups, hackathons, conferences, and increasingly in tech capitals across the nation. But first, to the small handful of incredible congressional and regulatory champions who have stood as advocates for blockchain technology in the digital asset industry, I extend my sincere gratitude and respect. Your efforts to push for clear, fair regulation and legislation over the past years have played a critical role in shaping the path forward for us all and to where we are today. However, until recently, Congress largely treated cryptocurrency as a fringe issue, something not worth serious legislative attention. Digital assets were often an afterthought in financial policy discussions, and when they were mentioned, they were predominantly associated with illicit finance, hacks, and scams, rather than innovation as well. Few lawmakers took the time to study the technology, and even fewer saw blockchain as a transformative force capable of reshaping industries beyond just finance. And with no sign from Congress that new laws were being discussed in earnest, federal regulators interpreted this silence as a designation of responsibility to them, assuming that their existing jurisdiction extended to crypto by default. As a result of Congress's inaction and the explosion of growth during the ICO boom came the enforcement-first era. Rather than making clear, structured policies and following public rulemaking procedures to create fitting regulatory regime, U.S. regulators, particularly the SEC, took a different approach. Claimed jurisdiction based on ill-fitting existing rules, filed charges against the biggest targets, and let the courts decide the outcome. That is, regulate through enforcement. Let's review some of the most significant SEC enforcement cases that shaped this past era. In 2019, SEC versus Telegram forced the company to abandon its project, a blockchain project, before litigation even began, sending a chilling message that even well-funded, visible initiatives were vulnerable. That same year, SEC versus Kik, a court ruled against Kik's argument that its KIN token was a utility rather than a security, reinforcing the SEC's broad stance that ICOs constituted securities offerings, regardless of token utility. In 2020, the SEC filed suit against Ripple, charging that its XRP tokens were unregistered securities offerings. Oh, pardon me. Sorry about this, folks. My goodness. All right. Pardon me. And in 2023, the SEC suit against Coinbase highlighted the agency's inconsistent approach, despite having approved of Coinbase's IPO in 2021. Despite that, the SEC later sued the company for allegedly listing unregistered securities without providing clear criteria for its claims. This abrupt shift left the industry frustrated, underscoring the need for regulatory transparency and consistency. Then, the SEC came after NFTs. In 2023, the SEC charged impact theory with offering unregistered securities. As part of the settlement, the group agreed to pay $6 million in penalties. The project also committed to several intense undertakings, including the destruction of its remaining NFTs within its control and the revision of the code for the NFTs to prevent it from receiving any future royalties from secondary market transactions. In 2023, the SEC also charged Stoner Cats, alleging the sale of NFTs to fund production of its animated series constituted an unregistered securities offering. In 2024, the SEC issued a Wells notice against OpenSea, signaling that certain NFT collections listed on the platform may be securities, raising concerns about the entire NFT marketplace model. Also in 2024, the SEC targeted Flyfish, an NFT-based membership club, arguing that its memberships-based NFTs resembled investment contracts. Finally, in 2024, the SEC filed suit against CyberKongs, alleging that its NFT staking rewards were unregistered securities offerings. The SEC's sudden pivot to NFTs further highlighted its unpredictable, overreaching, and opaque approach to digital assets. While the SEC has been prosecuting other industry projects, other regulators like the CFTC, and let's not forget SEC Chair Gensler and other SEC commissioners at times, have taken the public stance that some digital assets are commodities, not securities, and not under the sole jurisdiction of the SEC. The damage of the SEC's approach is quite apparent. Between the previous two SEC chairs, Jay Clayton and Gary Gensler, close to almost 200 enforcement actions have been issued against the crypto industry since 2017, with almost 130 of those cases coming from Gensler himself. This approach left blockchain founders in an impossible situation. If you launched without direct regulatory approval, you risked lawsuits. If you tried to seek approval, there was no clear framework to follow. If you tried to speak with the SEC, you risked putting a target on your back. And if you operated overseas, you were still vulnerable to U.S. enforcement actions. Over the years, regulatory overreach outside the SEC has also threatened blockchain innovation, often due to the misinterpretation of how the technology operates. Across multiple cases and agencies, we've seen ill-fitting financial laws applied to blockchain technologies, creating unrealistic compliance burdens and setting dangerous legal precedents. From the start, and especially as regulatory scrutiny increased, crypto companies also found it increasingly difficult to access traditional banking services. Many banks refused to work with crypto businesses, citing regulatory uncertainty and compliance risks. Some crypto-friendly banks, such as Silvergate and Signature Bank, later faced intense regulatory pressure, causing them to either shut down or scale back their crypto services. And even fully licensed crypto businesses, like those that have received the New York BIT license, struggle to open accounts, receive loans, and access essential banking infrastructure, a fundamental service and right for any business. As it turns out, we've recently learned, the FDIC, at the direction of the Biden administration, had been giving banks clear guidance not to bank the industry. We now have that proof. This created a two-tiered financial system, one where traditional businesses had full access to banking services, while blockchain investors and innovators were treated as financial pariahs. Further, restrictions such as the SEC's Staff Accounting Bulletin, or SAB 121, requiring banks to mark digital assets as liabilities on their balance sheets rather than assets, made it prohibitively difficult to provide custody and banking services to crypto businesses by banks. I should note that rules on accounting for financial entities is also not even under the purview of the SEC, but here we are. In 2021, the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act was the first foray of Congress into crypto, meaningfully. The Act expanded the definition of a broker to include miners, validators, and even developers, entities that do not and cannot collect consumer innovation or comply with traditional financial reporting rules that brokers are subject to. This misclassification exposed a fundamental misunderstanding of blockchain infrastructure, treating decentralized participants, infrastructure providers, and even developers as if they were centralized intermediaries like banks. Similarly, a flawed approach emerged in 2022 when the U.S. Treasury sanctioned Tornado Cash, a non-custodial smart contract privacy tool, as if it were a legal entity with agency, and as though it had control over its users' funds, instead of recognizing it as the publicly available protocol that it is. Despite having no control over how it was used, its developers were charged with facilitating money laundering simply for writing open source code. This dangerous precedent raised serious concerns about how software developers could be held criminally liable for how their code is used, creating more landmines that developers need to navigate in the US. Making matters worse, Tornado's Cash's legal battle led to a reinterpretation of money transmission laws recently, where a court argued that non-custodial smart contracts could be considered money transmitters, a move that directly contradicted decades of legal precedent and that would require developers to comply with yet another set of ill-fitting and expensive financial rules they cannot essentially work with. In 2024, the CFPB, the Financial Protection Bureau, compounded these issues by misapplying Regulation E, a rule designed originally for banks and payment companies, to blockchain gaming and self-custodial wallets. This misguided interpretation suggested that in-game transactions should be regulated like traditional financial transactions, despite the fact that gaming platforms are not financial institutions, and wallet providers do not custody funds like banks do. Moreover, the CFPB claims that self-hosted wallet providers have access to their users' funds as a way to make the rule apply, which is fundamentally incorrect. If enforced, this ruling could force game developers and wallet providers into an impossible compliance framework, threatening NFT-based gaming models, self-custody, and privacy-preserving DeFi innovation in the US. Time and again, we see a recurring pattern. Regulatory agencies attempting to apply outdated financial laws and rules to blockchain technology, ignoring the unique, decentralized, and permissionless nature of these systems. Whether through expanding broker definitions, misclassifying smart contracts, or treating blockchain tools like banks, these missteps push innovation offshore, stifle economic growth, and undermine the very principles of open source development. The need for clear, tailored, and technically educated regulation has never been more urgent. And if we have the polls ready. You don't have the polls? Okay. We don't have the polls ready, but I will ask two questions, and I will ask folks to raise their hands if they'd be willing. As of right now, based on what I've said, do you feel safe launching a token in the US? Raise your hand if yes. Okay. 2 people. Great. Second question, raise your hand if yes. Did you move overseas due to the US regulatory landscape and its hostility? All right, a couple hands in the air. Okay, great, thank you. But today, things are changing. For the first time in years, we are seeing a real movement toward fair, structured blockchain regulation and legislation in the US. Blockchain is now, for the first time, a political issue and being debated at the highest levels of US politics. In the early months of 2024, crypto was a fringe issue on the campaign trail. In the span of a few short months, crypto became the issue on the campaign trail. And thanks to industry efforts, it is clear to everyone in Washington that the crypto voter exists and that we are finally being recognized for the power we hold. Bipartisan support for forward-thinking regulation is growing. Blockchain and digital assets are now a mainstream political issue with significant implications for financial policy, innovation, national security, and economic competitiveness. Last month, we met with dozens of freshman members of Congress at the Chamber. The vast majority were all keenly aware of the impact the industry had on the election cycle overall. And critically, most of them recognized the impact on their own races. This is increasingly true for the old guard in Congress as well. And today, we are seeing a bipartisan coalition emerge around the need for clear and fair crypto regulation and laws. Republicans have largely framed crypto as a financial freedom and innovation issue, arguing that excessive regulation stifles entrepreneurship and drives businesses offshore, something everyone here can likely attest to. Democrats historically have been more skeptical of the industry and are beginning to recognize, finally, the crypto's role in financial inclusion, DeFi, and even social justice initiatives. Both sides currently agree on one thing. The lack of regulatory clarity has been bad for both businesses and consumers. Across Congress, bipartisan and bicameral efforts are ramping up to coordinate and prioritize this industry. Congress is working hard to make sure that legislation written and passed this year protects the industry, allows a policy climate that attracts talent back to our shores, and protects users and markets. This shift is one of the clearest signs that blockchain is here to stay, and that the future of the U.S. Its future in the U.S. will be determined by the decisions we make today. Under the current White House administration, they are no longer ignoring crypto. It is actively shaping its future through public support, executive orders, and coordinated action. The president issued an executive order on his 3rd day in office that publicly solidified this administration's support for and protection of digital assets. The order outlines key priorities: protecting software development from unfair prosecution of developers, ensuring mining and validation remain protected from arbitrary restrictions, preserving financial freedom by preventing unlawful censorship of transactions, upholding self-custody rights, affirming that users can hold their own private keys, promoting US dollar-backed stablecoins, reinforcing the dollar's dominance in finance, guaranteeing fair banking access for all lawful crypto businesses and individuals, providing clear regulatory rules, providing regulatory clarity, ensuring transparent and technology-neutral policymaking, and blocking the issuance of US CBDC, preventing a government-controlled digital currency. This executive order also created the President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets. That effort, led by White House crypto and AI czar David Sachs and the group's executive director, Bo Hines, has already met with us at the Chamber multiple times to coordinate and to ensure that industry has a seat at the table. By July of this year, the White House has ordered that all relevant federal agencies coordinating with industry present a comprehensive report on the litany of rules, orders, guidance, and letters these agencies have issued on crypto, and that the report shall come with proposals of what to keep, edit, and what to overwrite. In parallel, the SEC and CFTC have new leadership and are already charting a new course. Paul Atkins, the SEC chair nominee, was a former SEC commissioner and former advisor to the Digital Chamber, an active leader in our policy work over the past few years. Throughout his career, Paul has been vocal about the harmful effects of regulatory uncertainty, emphasizing that a lack of clear guidelines drives businesses offshore, weakens U.S. competitiveness, and stifles innovation. His track record reflects a commitment to protecting capital formation, fostering responsible financial innovation, and ensuring regulatory agencies do not exceed their authority. With Paul at the helm, the SEC is poised to restore trust, providing long overdue clarity that enables responsible innovation to flourish in the U.S. His leadership represents a new chapter, one in which regulation is driven by collaborative engagement, not intimidation. CFTC Chair nominee Brian Quintenz has been a vocal supporter of blockchain and digital assets as well, and a critic of the OCC's overreach into the space. As a former CFTC commissioner, A16Z government advisory partner, longtime advocate for blockchain innovation, and outspoken critic of regulatory overreach, Quintenz has played a critical role in shaping the discourse around the digital asset policy in the U.S. Quintenz was one of the first U.S. regulators to publicly recognize the transformative potential of DeFi and crypto. Also, acting chairs Caroline Pham of the CFTC and Mark Ueda of the SEC are supportive of digital assets and have been engaging with industry leaders, advocating for public input in crypto regulation and pushing for a more fair and balanced approach. They, alongside with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, have often stood in opposition to the previous chairs of their own commissions over the past few years. This shift in leadership is already producing results. All within the past month, the SEC has dropped lawsuits and investigations into multiple players. SEC dropped its suit against Coinbase, setting a precedent that listing tokens does not make an exchange an unregistered securities broker. Further, the tokens named in the lawsuit are no longer being claimed by the SEC as unregistered securities. The SEC closed its investigation into Robinhood's crypto business, showing new resistance to apply outdated securities laws to retail-focused crypto platforms. Recently, the SEC dropped its investigation into OpenSea, sending a strong message that NFTs are not within the SEC's jurisdiction. Tuesday, the SEC dropped their investigation into Uniswap Labs, signaling a new stance on DeFi. Yesterday, we learned that the suit against MetaMask is also being dropped. Also yesterday, the SEC, I should finally note, pardon me. And finally, I should note that instead of being met with hostility, this new leadership has been actively working with our industry for input and welcoming collaboration. They are engaging with the Chamber and the industry to make sure to create a safe forum for engagement. Other government agencies are also making up for past mistakes and working to undo the damage caused by the FDIC's real mandate to banks, discouraging them from serving crypto businesses. This is, of course, known as Operation Choke Point 2.0. Congressional hearings and lawmakers' demands for fair treatment of the industry, calling for the FDIC to immediately halt this unfair process, have resulted in the introduction of bipartisan legislation earlier this month. The IRS's rule that sought to classify DeFi protocols as miners as brokers under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Acts for tax reporting purposes is in the process of being overturned by Congress. Lawmakers are working to pass legislation to explicitly exempt decentralized protocols from broker classification, ensuring that blockchain infrastructure providers are not unfairly targeted. The CFPB's misguided effort to apply Regulation E payment laws to crypto assets, blockchain gaming platforms, and self-custodial wallets in the blockchain gaming space has been frozen by executive order of the president. One of the strongest signals that the U.S. is embracing crypto is the rapid legislative progress in Congress. Even last year, lawmakers struggled to agree on basic principles for regulatory frameworks for digital assets. But today, bipartisan, bicameral collaboration is accelerating, and key pieces of legislation that will provide much-needed clarity to the industry are closer than ever to becoming law. Last year, we came close to passing bipartisan stablecoin legislation, but for major disagreements, particularly over the state versus federal oversight portion, prevented a final agreement. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle now recognize the need for a clear national framework for stablecoins. A bipartisan bill is expected to be finalized this year, bringing a long-awaited regulatory certainty to issuers, users, and financial institutions. Beyond market structure, one of the most significant legislative efforts shaping the digital assets markets is the Financial Innovation for the 21st Century Act, or FIT21, also known more broadly as the Market Structure Act. This is the legislation that defines whether digital assets are securities, commodities, or other. Last session, FIT21 gained strong bipartisan support, but political disagreements slowed it down. Now, with developing agreement on key principles, market structure legislation is expected to move forward this year. If passed, it would create a comprehensive federal regulatory framework for digital assets markets, making the U.S. a global leader in crypto regulation, and finally giving the industry a clear, well-crafted, and appropriate regulatory framework to operate in. My time is running short, but I'll also mention that this past Congress, I had the distinct honor of helping to write and introduce the first ever standalone legislation addressing the correct classification of NFTs, protecting them from SEC overreach. This act, the New Frontiers in Technology Act, or NFT Act, is likely to be seen introduced again this year. The same thing is true with self-hosted wallet legislation that has been introduced the last few Congresses and is likely to be reintroduced and prioritized again this year. So I'll reintroduce the polls, so to speak. With this knowledge in mind, I'd like to ask now, do you feel safe now launching a token in the US this year? Okay, seeing some more hands raised, great. And my final question is, are you ready to build? All right, super. So I'll close out by saying, for the first time ever, I see a positive, coordinated effort across Congress, the White House, and regulatory agencies to bring clarity to blockchain policy in the U.S. The conversation has shifted. We are no longer asking, will the U.S. ever allow blockchain to flourish? Instead, we are now discussing actively, how do we take advantage of this opportunity to create an environment where blockchain innovation thrives safely and where we can finally realize the power of a decentralized internet. While there is still much work to be done, and while the efforts of policy professionals like myself will be strengthened by aligned industry support, the signs are undeniable. This, finally, is the moment we've been waiting for. The only true risks we face right now of losing this golden moment are if we are unwilling to work with lawmakers, and if we start fighting amongst ourselves. This is why joining trade associations like the Digital Chamber, where your voice can be heard and amplified, and where we all can work together, is so critical right now. So I'll reiterate. Congress is drafting real laws. Courts are pushing back against overreach. Agencies are adjusting their approach. The White House is all in. America is waking up to the fact that blockchain is the future and that America must lead. It's the bottom of the ninth. The bases are loaded. We're only one run behind, but we already have 2 outs. We must work together hard to make sure that we win this ballgame, and I know we can do it. Thank you.